The Anatomy of Peace by the Arbinger Institute. Life would be so much easier if people would only stop being so difficult. Pretty much everyone has, at one time or another, been entrenched in a conflict with a troubled teen, a disenchanted spouse, or a pestering neighbor. And, as you probably know, confronting the difficult person usually leads to all the blame being put on you. Truth be told, it's difficult to sustain a conflict when one person chooses not to play along. So, if there are feuds or quarrels in your life, you're at least partially responsible. But how can you pinpoint where your responsibility begins? And how can you remove yourself from conflict? That's what these blinks are about. As you'll find out, even your well-intentioned efforts trying to help someone overcome a drug habit, for instance, can result in a never-ending cycle of reproach and resistance. The crucial part in this is your mindset, or, more specifically, how you see and address people. This is good news, because your mindset is something that you can change. There are two ways to view those around you, with either war or peace in your heart. Let's imagine that you were raised to fear and hate left-handed people, because 2,000 years ago a group of left-handed people attacked your family's right-hand ancestors. But one day, you notice a man leaving a store that sells left-handed goods. As he's in the middle of crossing the street, he falls and drops his bag, spilling his belongings. What do? There are basically two options. You can have a heart of peace or a heart of war. To have a heart of war is to see the person in need of help as inferior, or as an object rather than a human being, which is a sure way to perpetuate conflicts. Your inner voice may tell you not to help him, because you were taught that his people hate your people. But this frames him as only being part of a group or concept, rather than recognizing him as an individual. The heart of war suppresses our sense of compassion and urge to help. It's the kind of mindset that creates and perpetuates hate, conflict and war. The better option is to have a heart of peace and listen to your sense of compassion, to see those around you as human beings. Even if you are forced into a war, you can still treat your opponent with compassion, which is what the Sultan Saladin did in the 12th century after the Crusaders massacred the people of Jerusalem. Eventually, Saladin's Muslim army retook the city from the Christians, but he did not slaughter the innocent, as the Christians had a century before. He forbade his people to harm them, provided them with safe passage, and even kept the city open to Christian pilgrims in the years that followed. This is what a heart of peace looks like. You choose compassion and treat others as human beings, burdened by their own fears and desires. Once this happens, others will be more likely to treat you the same way, increasing the likelihood of peace. We actively perpetuate conflicts by refusing to accept other perspectives. No one enjoys getting into an argument with their spouse, child, or co-worker. Yet all too often we end up starting and restarting conflicts by engaging in the very behaviors that we don't like. This is what happens when we have a heart of war and see those around us as enemies. We go around thinking everyone is trying to cheat us or work against us, a mentality that inevitably leads to conflict. Making matters worse, this approach to life results in our attracting like-minded people who support our mentality, which only draws more people into the conflict. We can see this play out on the world stage as well, with groups of people being demonized and categorized as others who can only do harm. Many of these conflicts escalate to the point where solutions are virtually out of reach. Even when negotiations can be arranged, one nation will often believe that the talks were actually set up as a subversive trick. This is basically the situation that Israel and Palestine find themselves in. And when two people have a heart of war, it can result in collusion when two conflicting parties inadvertently perpetuate the conflict. This happens when two people deny the fact that the other person can have a different yet equally valid perspective. Furthermore, they'll refuse to admit that their assumptions may be wrong and insist that they are always right. All of which means that negotiations, and any hope of finding common ground, are repeatedly crushed. This happens in the home as well, when parents insist that they always know what's best for their children. But let's not forget that children are individuals with their own thoughts, just like anyone else. And they actually know a lot about their own needs, which we can learn about if we treat them respectfully and listen to their perspective. Instead of trying to change someone, improve things by changing the environment. When was the last time someone said you did something wrong? How did you react? Oftentimes, people will try to change a person when they find something wrong, but this only ends in further conflicts. Let's say your partner hasn't done his or her share of the chores in the past month. Your natural inclination is to say something about it, but that doesn't mean you should try to force your partner to behave or think in a certain way. This will only be taken as criticism, something nobody likes. Indeed, criticizing usually only makes matters worse. Whether you realize it or not, your partner has a reason for thinking or behaving as he or she does. So try to listen to your partner, to relate to whatever he or she has to say about the issue at hand.